There are few places the Vietnam War has had such a large effect on the United States than the American Midwest. Films like The Deer Hunter highlight the effect the war had on small Midwestern Rust Belt towns and the way communities would shift. 76% of men sent to Vietnam were of working class or lower middle class backgrounds. Kent State University is synonymous nationally with the war due to the protests and subsequent shooting that would occur on campus. Ohio itself, home to Kent State University, would have over 200,000 Ohioans served during the war and around 3,000 casualties. Today, these veterans are scattered across the state, some donning caps proclaiming their service, others keeping it to themselves. Through research with the Maps Museum, Kent State University, Maps Museum, and others, I've been able to piece together an idea of what Vietnam was like for Ohio veterans and their lives after service. Perhaps the most famous of those enlisted from Ohio would be First Lieutenant Sharon Lane of the Army Nurse Corps. Born and raised in South Canton, she would graduate from the local Altman Nursing College in 1965. Lane would find the career as a nurse at Altman unfulfilling and would quit to train as a secretary at Canton Business College, but would also find that too boring. But in early 1968, Lane would feel called to join the U.S. Army Nurse Corps, finding the thrilling life she desired. The choice would feel like a shock to her family, as Lane never expressed wanting a military career. But Lane was steadfast in her decision, even after a friend she planned to enlist with decided not to. After originally being stationed at Fitzsimmons Army Hospital, Lane would be transferred to Chu Lai Surgical Hospital near Da Nang in Vietnam. There she would put her talent and skills as a nurse to great use, as well as beloved by her fellow servicemen and women. Unfortunately, Lane would be killed by hostile fire in June 1969 during a night shift, the only nurse to have been done so during the Vietnam War. Canton commemorates the dearly adored lieutenant in many ways, including a statue in her likeness at Altman Hospital College and a display dedicated to her at the Maps Museum.
When I was stateside, I was stationed up in New York, upstate New York, at an air base, and yeah, I worked in the hospital there. I remember they had taken us all to the theater on the base, and they wanted us to fill out where we were stationed, where we took school, and a place where we want to go. And I remember this sergeant sitting next to me made a comment about, "You haven't got a hair on your ass if you don't put down Vietnam." I said, "Oh yeah?" And I put it down. Before I know it, I was on my way to Vietnam.
Speaking here is Mike Toth of Canton, Ohio, an Air Force medic who had served in Vietnam from 1969 to 1970 at the 95th EVAC Hospital in Da Nang. His main takeaway from the experience was, it was effin' hot. Michael returned to the country on May 5, 1970, and had no idea of the May 4th shooting, which led to a humorous interaction. Other instances, such as a rumored Viet Cong attack on the hospital, which led Mike to be the only one with the gravely injured soldiers as most of their staff evacuated, and an event that especially stuck with him, where a departing plane was leaving base and was shot down. As Mike's job was to recover casualty bodies and return them to the hospital, this was an intense event and one that truly struck him.
Other than the heat and the mugginess, was just the people. Uh, they were Asians. When I got off the plane and got into what do you call that, where you go to wait for the plane and you sit in
the airport?
Not the airport, but the building. But anyways, I got out of the plane and was going into the building, and the first thing I remembered seeing was stacks of lumber, and a woman was sitting on top of that, breastfeeding her child. This was 5 o'clock in the morning.
And this was a Vietnamese woman?
It was a Vietnamese woman and her child. I only assumed he was Vietnamese too. That was the first thing I saw, and I thought, well, this isn't going to be fun, you know.
Different.
But, yeah, definitely different. Definitely different.
Mm-hmm.
I volunteered to do helicopter duty. They were looking for some people to go out and pick up casualties,
Mm-hmm.
and I volunteered to do that just for something different than to sit there and sweat. So
At least you were moving and sweating.
yeah, moving. Yeah, I could at least put my head outside the helicopter and get the sweat off my face.
Like a dog out a car window.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Well stated. Very well stated.
Mm-hmm.
But I did that. I enjoyed doing that more than anything. The closest I came to combat was on duty at the air base, and there was a plane, an American plane that went down
Oh my.
with, well, quite a number of guys that were heading home, and it was shot down, and we had to go out and pick up the bodies.
Oh yeah.
And I volunteered to go do that. It was just so many guys had came out of that plane. I couldn't get over that. And then, of course, not of course, but then the Viet Cong were out in the jungle somewhere, and they were taking shots at us.
Mm-hmm.
So they sent in a group of Marines, Vietnamese, South Vietnamese Marines, and they ran out into the jungle and was shooting the enemy. And then we went back to picking up more bodies. That was probably the ugliest day of my life.
Yeah.
Was picking up. It was just a moving thing for me to do. I thought, will I ever get out of this place? Because that's what you start to think about after about 3 or 4 months. Will I ever get out of here?
Mm-hmm.
Will it ever get cooler in this country? But I was just proud to be part of the American crew that helped. You know, I was not in combat. I never took a weapon and shot at the enemy.
What?
Didn't have that.
I just turned the beep off.
Although we had a perimeter around the hospital and around that end of the base, where if we started to take shots at us, we could get rifles or whatever, machine guns, whatever, and take our positions along the perimeter to make sure they wouldn't come running. That happened twice to me, but they never came.
Okay.
Thank God.
Right.
Yeah, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
But and that went on for a year. And as time got to be shorter, and what was it? What they called it? It was a term we called for guys who were had short times left, short timers or something like that. And you just stayed away from anything. You want to go home. You want to go home in a casket.
Chance it. You didn't chance it.
Yeah. I know one other time, the nurses, and there were 3 or 4 of us medics working it was like three rooms of casualties. And there was a rumor out that the Viet Cong had come over the fence and they were on their way. And the nurses and the doctors and the medics had to leave that area and go to a place where they would be safe.
Yeah.
I refused to go.
Sense
I
of
stayed,
toilet paper.
and I found I found in a desk a weapon, a pistol, and I kept the pistol on me.
I just need to
And the casualties were asking me, "Can you take me off the bed and put me under the bed?" Well,
Yep.
there were like 40, 50 guys there.
Yeah.
But I did stay, and I caught hell for that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they said, "Why weren't you with the nurses and stuff?" I says, "I couldn't leave them guys and sleep again."
Yeah. And I'm sure if anything, that just brought them a bunch of comfort, you know?
Class 4
Yeah.
digits.
Like,
Well, yeah. Basically, that was my story. That's my story. That's
your story?
basically what happened. I was just then when the day came, I left. I thought, oh God, I hope this plane didn't get shot down as I'm leaving this airplane, this runway, because it had happened. There were some
yeah,
planes
I mean,
that
you
had
said
taken
that was one of your bigger experiences.
Right, was I was afraid, just don't let this end this way. Let me get home first, and then take my life. I don't care. I just don't want to be here.
Yeah.
It's really
What's the
John,
red
isn't it?
stuff?
And it was a year to the day
What's the red stuff?
that I was
Yeah.
over there.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I went. A friend of mine, a buddy of mine, I knew he was at Kent. I thought, well, I had a car, and I thought I'll drive up and go see how Skip is doing. And I drove up there, and as I got into Kent, at the school, I seen a Jeep go by with a machine gun on the top of it, and there was 2 guys in it, and and I'm thinking, what in the world is going on? So I drove in, and this Jeep turned around and stopped me, and the guy says, "Where do you think you're going?" I says, "Well, I come up to see a buddy of mine here in school." I says, "I just got home from Vietnam." And he says, "You were in Vietnam?"
Sorry, the phone.
Listen, I'm not bragging about that, okay?
Yeah.
The way he said that. And then he proceeded to tell me that the shooting, those kids that were killed, was the day. Well, that happened while I was
In the air.
in
Yeah,
the
you
air
were
coming
flying.
home. I didn't know anything about it. I
It's
told
not like
I told
today
Jason.
where you got your phone and instantly you hear all this stuff. I mean, and he was probably exhausted, went home, hung with his parents and went to bed.
Yeah.
That was it. Probably
Yeah.
didn't even
Yeah.
watch
With
TV.
the air conditioning on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That-
it was weird the way you said it. You were in Vietnam. Well, so what?
Yeah.
I'm not the only guy who was there.
Were you just wearing like regular like clothing?
I was
and-
wearing my civilian clothes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. I didn't wear a uniform after that.
That is so bizarre.
It was
Wow.
strange. And I was telling Jason that story not too long ago, and he cracked up. He says, "You're kidding me." I says, "No." I says, I don't know what was going through that lieutenant's mind, but he was impressed that I was in Vietnam. Okay.
But then they still told you to turn around and leave.
I had to go. I had to leave. I had to
Okay.
leave. I couldn't stay there.
I couldn't remember if you actually saw him that day
No,
or not.
no, I didn't. No, I didn't see Skip that day.
Massillon, Ohio is home to a large monument to local and national veterans next door to their local museum. They have two specially made monuments for Vietnam veterans, a viaduct and memorial to Stark County casualties, as well as a statue of a typical Army man. Massillon's museum next door even has a special exhibit highlighting the local veterans, featuring copies of 2 articles by Life magazine about the city's relationship with the Vietnam War, including private interviews with many citizens on LBJ's recent policies. Through letters, soldiers would communicate with friends and family back home. David Bowman of the Air Force would exchange letters with his younger brother Jim back in North Canton, where he would request Jim to send newspaper clippings of a football game between local rival high schools, Canton McKinley and Massillon. In Bowman's letters, he talks about playing volleyball on base, the relationships between local Buddhists and Catholics, hoping Massillon would win the game, and an incident that led men to begin carrying guns on them even when there was no threat of violence. Bowman would be stationed at Fuck Air Base from 1965 to 1968, and fades into obscurity after that. I was unable to see if he still lives in North Canton, as the most recent local article mentioning him is from 1992. But sometimes veterans don't want to be found. When returning from service, many veterans were met with hostility, especially after the Kent State shooting, in which 4 students were shot and killed by the National Guard during a protest against bombing campaigns on Cambodia during the Vietnam War. Plenty of veterans were nervous to speak about their service, and veterans like Mike don't talk about their service leisurely, or even mention that they served. But recently there has been a great push to put previous prejudices aside and acknowledge the trauma and sacrifice of veterans and what they meant for their community. At the MAPS Museum, many volunteers and employees are former Vietnam vets and make a conscious effort to have their stories known. The MAPS library has personal interviews with vets on their experiences that anyone can check out and watch, as well as an upcoming exhibit on the war with original uniforms and artifacts. Currently, the museum features a volunteer-built recreation of a tent field hospital. The hospital even includes an original artifact of the Ohio flag, given to the tent creator, Ted Matthews, who had worked on the original version of the field hospital. Hopefully, the vets of Ohio can rest easy knowing their service is greatly respected by their state and their local communities.